when Sicily was secured, they split the troops and sent half of them to train to make the landing in Anzio, Italy. The other half were sent back to England to train for D-Day. We went back to England.
You went back to train for D-Day.
We loaded on ships, went back to England.
How long was it before you knew you were actually going to be involved in that invasion? Was it kept pretty quiet?
We knew when we went back to England, but we knew what we were going to do. We knew we were going back there to come in on the other side of Europe. And that was probably 8-10 months. I don't remember exactly.
I went with a whole complete hospital unit. You'd be shocked how well the Army plans everything months ahead. We had everything in this hospital, and we went on a boat. We were called skilled personnel, and we went with some more skilled people. And I started in a convoy, and when we got to England, they put us on a troop train. We landed in the Firth of Clyde, that's clear up in the north, just as far north as they go, and had to go down to the southern part. It was right on the beach where they put all these foreign troops. There's 4 million, they said, down there. 4 million Americans. And this hospital was a brick 1,800 bed hospital. And we had all the nurses and all the doctors and all the technicians and everything. And we had to set it up and get it ready. And they started bringing these guys from Africa and Sicily and Italy.
This 1,800 bed, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was solely set up to take care of casualties come off the beach.
That's what we were there for, see, is right
That's
down
what they were there for. They were set up in that area for the sole purpose of taking casualties to come off the beach. So this is planning in advance, quite a ways.
Everything.
And this is a year before the invasion ever took place?
Yes, this was in...
It was in the fall of...
Well, we went to stock the hospital and get it ready, but it had never been used before. The English built it for us, and it was all red brick. I believe it was 42 or 43. When was it, Stan?
43.
43, because I met him on my 23rd birthday, and I had been there since September, and I met him in November. And then we stayed into operation until after the invasion, until it moved in, further. First we got the Navy, and then we got the paratroopers, and then we got the riflemen, and it just went, as it advanced, that's what we got. And
you knew who was going to be coming next by who was invading next?
We knew that the Navy would be first, and then those glider people, or paratroopers, they were those, as far as I can remember, they were the second ones, and they were terrible. They just about killed them all right there, and the ones that got back were just dying and crippled and shot up and landed in barbed wire, and they had gas, tetanus, and it was terrible. And we were really busy, and we were busy all the time. And then when we got through and treated them well enough, they shipped them back to the general hospitals, and they were anywhere from 80 to 100 miles, weren't they, from the station.
What'd they do to train you for this day? What'd they do to train you for D-Day? You send from Sicily, they sent you back to England, and you knew you were going to train.
We did everything. Most of all, we goofed off. We were there. Partially was to train. We did go up on the North Sea, up at Ilfracombe, clear up on the North End. We trained landing maneuvers. They'd put us on these landing craft. It was in the wintertime. The water was rough and cold. They'd put us on this landing craft, take us out, and then we'd practice landing. Those landing crafts, you come in, it had a ramp on the front. It hold us somewhere around 40 minutes, I remember, 40 or 50. You'd come in as far as you could, they'd drop that ramp, out you go. The water might be waist deep, it might be shoulder deep, but out you go, and that water up there was cold. But anyhow, we trained up there for a while, and then we trained on boarding ship, or debarking more than boarding. See, the troop ships were big and high, and we, to make the landing, we had to go out on troop ships, and after we got out within, I think it was 6 miles of the beach, we debarked from the troop ships onto the landing craft. And the way you did that, well, you went down a rope ladder, scramble net we called it, just a big square of rope. And this big troop ship was bouncing like this, and these little landing crafts going like that. See, it's pretty hard to make a match. But anyhow, that was our training mostly. Was in, we had a little you know, aircraft identification, stuff like that. But most of our training was actually for landing. And we spent the winter that way. And then next spring, of course, the Omaha Beach, or the beach landing was on June the 6th, 1944. And we boarded ships again. When I was on the advanced detail, we went up to Scotland and boarded these troop transports and got them ready for the bulk of the troops. Then we came back down to the southern coast, loaded the troops, rendezvoused overnight or however long it was, and the next, along about midnight, a little later, we started getting on these landing craft. And we hit the beach at daylight. My battalion was in the second wave. The first wave was a little bit farther from me to you when we hit the beach. It was behind the high tide mark, and the tide was coming in. So this is what the beach was.
But we knew ahead of time because that evening, in England in the summertime it doesn't get dark till about midnight. We saw just wave after wave all night of planes going over, and they had lights, you know.
They were bombing the defenses to solve
and we saw the gliders being towed. We watched them. And we knew that they call radio over there wireless, and we could hear it when they opened up, the Navy opened up those big shells, big guns. We figured it was 80 miles away, and it just shook. We lived in Quonset huts, 8 people to a hut, and the ground shook, everything shook, and we knew what was coming on because they had said it was coming any time.
Now the landing itself, Oliver, was tough. But it was probably the easiest operation that I ever was.
Wasn't the weather awful questionable on whether they were even going to land that day or not?
Huh?
Wasn't the weather pretty questionable?
The weather was questionable. It was stormy, and they finally said, well, they said it's cleared, we're going ahead. Now this is just the day before, as I remember. But people think about a landing as being the toughest of operations. Well, it's really very simple. Because there's only one way you can go. You can't go back. You get off that boat, you're either going to drown or you're going to get in there or get shot. And I couldn't swim. So we had to go forward. But if you think war is glamorous or lots of fun, we could see they had machine guns up on the cliff shooting at us, and cannon, but the machine guns I remember particularly. You'd see a line of splashes right through the water. The bullets hit it. And you'd hear just like bees going by. That's the machine gun bullets going by. Pretty soon you'd see a GI throw up his arms and down he'd go. And this is what we were going into. When we got to the beach, of course everyone was disorganized. And I very well remember, I was a first lieutenant. And when we landed, I didn't see a soldier there that I recognized all around me. And nobody knew what to do. Well, here came the colonel, commanding officer of our regiment, walking down the beach. He had a little old swagger stick, and he slapped himself on the leg. And I know he just scared any of us, but he saw that I was an officer. He said, Lieutenant, you better get your men off the beach. I said, they're not my men, sir. He said, they are now. I said, get them off the beach. There's only 2 men on the beach, and they're dead or about to die. He said, get them off. He walked right on down the beach. Well, that seemed to be what we needed, because I found a sergeant or two, and we'd round up some men that, I'd never seen them in my life, didn't know who they were, didn't know their names or anything. And we said, well, let's get going. And the engineers were trying to get a lane through the minefield that was out in front of us. They had string tape. And they had a minefield and they string tape along there. We crawled across that beach on our belly. And if somebody hit a mine, we'd crawl around him and keep crawling. And we got off. Got into a wooded ravine, and there we were comparatively safe for the time being. But we had actually crawled on our bellies across that beach, and if it hadn't been for that colonel, I think we'd all died. And I'm sure he was, well, to me, he was quite a man.
You were probably scared to it, all the
Well, I'm sure he was.
gun
From the
fire.
beach, we got up into there's a big old cliff there, but I don't know, it looked like it was a mile high, but I suppose it was maybe 50, 60 feet, maybe more. We got up on that, we got up into, you've heard of the hedgerows, we got into the hedgerows. And we fought through those hedgerows for several days. We went to Colleyville, Sumir, I think, was the first little village that we took. And those mines, Oliver, you couldn't, if you couldn't see them. They'd be buried in the sand. There'd be just little wires sticking up. And if some poor soul happened to step on one or brush on one, that was all of it. He was either killed or maimed. And of course, the mine detectors, they had these sweepers out in front of them, and they would, when they found one, they'd either make a detour around it, or if they couldn't do that, they'd go in there and work that sand away and defuse it.
There's been a lot of casualties with those mines.
From there on, it was still tough.
What percent of them died that landed?
What percent, Stan?
I don't know. I can't tell you. I don't know how many died. I don't know how many casualties there were, but I do know that normally a division at that time was made up of 3 regiments. Each regiment had 3 battalions. Each battalion had 3 rifle companies. And the normal plan of attack was to send 2 of each in attack and hold 1 in reserve. In this case, they sent 1 in attack, held 1 in reserve right at the beach, and held another in reserve out to sea. In other words, before they didn't think any of the first wave would get through. I expect the casualties ran about, I would guess around 30%. Now they weren't all killed, but there were a lot of casualties. And there were some that thought they were casualties. I remember one sergeant in my company, when we finally got together, we were up in the hedgerows, and we carried our canteens right back here, right on our hip. And there was some machine gun fire coming in. He said, "Oh my God, I'm hit." He said, "I gotta go back." He said, "Feel that blood running down the leg?" He shot his canteen. He stayed.
He stayed.
This little guy, he was a sergeant that I remember him. He was in the company that I was in. He was badly wounded in Africa, and he had a steel plate in his head. Well, he wanted to go back to his outfit, so they sent him back. And I saw that man's body. I stepped over in the hedgerows there. He didn't have a mark on him, but the concussion had blown that plate into his brain. He didn't have a mark on him. My best friend, when we ran around together in England, when we were on the beach, I started off, and he said, "Well," he said, "get going, Stan." He said, "I'm going back to see Cochran." He had a bullet that was really sore. He went back and he saw Cochran.
He came to the hospital there, and he brought all the messages.
He said, "Well, he's all
He
right."
wasn't even supposed to come in through our hospital, was he? But he got on, talked him into putting him on this ambulance that was coming that
We
way.
both knew him real well. He talked
And
to
he got in, and he came in. Oh, he was dirty and tired and hungry and had that place in his shoulder, but it was really something to see him, because they brought, because they stayed there 6 months, and we all knew him. And they brought the messages of all of them. But
Well,
it
yeah.
started raining, Stan, and Eisenhower, he came on the air 9:30 that morning. I'll never forget the speech he made to All-American Expeditionary Forces, he called us, and that the invasion had started. It was 9:30. And he just told it all, how it was and everything, and then it started raining. Didn't it rain 6 weeks, and we thought it was going to fail. They said they couldn't hang on. It's that low.
They couldn't get supplies.
It's going to push them out back into the ocean, and I'll tell you, it was terrible, because we didn't know what had happened, because England, like I said, they were down and out after Dunkirk. They just were
We got
done for.
about 6 miles in. See, the Americans landed on Omaha and Utah Beach. The English landed to our left. And I don't know whether the English landed on a tougher sector or not. But at any rate, the American troops, we went, when we got organized, we went right on in. We were about 6 miles in. And the British weren't getting anywhere. So they held us up for a while, so we could consolidate our positions, consolidate our line. And then from there on, when things got going, we didn't get to St. Lo. We bypassed that, our outfit did, and they closed what they called a fillet pocket. I don't know whether you studied that in history or not.
Falaise Gap.
The Fillet Gap it was. Fillet is a city in northwestern France. Well, we did a pincer movement. The Germans got up in there, or were up in there. And we did a pincer movement. We came around and cut them off like this. And that's what they call it, the Falaise Gap, or what did you call it?
Fillets Gap.
Yeah, Flay's Gap. That's what it was. We managed to get around them and cut off quite a contingent of German
That
troops.
saved them, I guess,
From there on, across France, it was merely load on trucks and kiss the French girls goodbye as we went through the streets, and we got clear to Belgium before we ran into any combat. We missed Paris, our outfit, and they routed us around Paris. We got clear into Belgium. And probably the next heavy fighting was around Aachen. Around Stolberg is near Aachen. That's where I got the gun moved on. We breached the Siegfried line there just below Aachen. And the Siegfried line is what the Germans set up there to supposed to be infallible, to keep
Tell him
everybody out of
how it
Germany.
was made, Stan. You'd just be shocked.
It had, they had tank traps. They called them dragon's teeth. They were big concrete pillars about so high and about so thick, and they were shaped kind of like this. The idea being that tank in there, he'd belly up on them and couldn't move. And back of these, of course, they had barbed wire entanglements, concertina wire and so on, and it's quite an entanglement. But then back of these, they had their concrete pillboxes. They had them on the beach too, but the Siegfried line was full of them. This concrete was about, I think it was around 6 foot thick. Just a dome pillbox. Had a door in the back, and they had an aperture about, probably maybe 3 by 10 inches. And then they had this come out like this, you know, it coned out. So they had machine guns. So they're back in there, and they could fire from here to here. Over this next pillbox, they had the same deal, and they'd get you in crossfire. But we did breach the Siegfried line, and we got into those pillboxes and got them out of there. Well, you had to, about the only way to get into the pillbox was to get somebody up close enough that could throw a grenade in that firing aperture, or get somebody around behind and get one in the back door. Because that's the only way you get them out of there. But at any rate, we did breach the Siegfried line. We missed Aachen. Part of our division went into Aachen, but we missed it. We did go across that boot hill, and there's a little boot hill down below Aachen. And I really think my battalion is the first outfit into Germany, but we didn't know exactly where we were, and we didn't radio in. We crossed this little boot hill and went from Belgium to Aachen, to Germany, and then back to Belgium, and then into Germany again. It's just a little place, maybe 2 or 3 miles away. There's lots of woods there. There's lots of, Germans had a lot of artillery. We had some tanks attached to us. We didn't use them very much because they do too much fire. They made so much noise that the Germans knew they'd come, so they'd shoot the artillery in that area. We had lots of casualties all through Germany from tree burst artillery. The shell would hit a tree and it would fragment. Just like it was set to explode on impact. It hit a tree and it fragmented. Well, it just scattered all over the whole area right around it. I was a very good friend, however, that I remember one guy came up to me from a sister company, and his company commander was Captain Briggs. And we went through Officers Candidate School together. We were real good friends. And I asked him how Briggs was, and he said, well, here's his guts right here. Scattered all over this guy's uniform. I never saw the man after he was killed, but he said, here's Briggs' guts right here. Had a tree burst gun. We, all in all, there were, I think, 6 campaigns on the continent. From I don't remember how they divided them, but the invade was one, and Normandy was one, and so on down the line. We went through all 6 campaigns. We had been pulled out of the, you've read and heard about the Battle of the Bulge and all that. We had been pulled out of that area for a rest. And they had sent troops in there to take their place, and we just got settled down to a week's rest, and the Germans broke through, so back in we went. And we spent that whole winter in snow and mud and ice, and clear up to it. It was so bad sometimes the vehicle couldn't move at all. We made one attack, my company did, in a snowstorm. We walked right over the German positions, and they didn't know where we were going, we didn't know we were there. We got way out in front. I sent my runner and radio operator back to the rear to make contact, and they got captured. And incidentally, this radio operator, when I was coming home, I was on a boat with a lot of repatriated prisoners, and he came up to me and said, "Hello, Captain Winter. He's been released and he's on a boat on the way home. Same boat I was on." The probably the most brutal was the weather, and then during the winter when we got the bulge secured again. We crossed the Roar River at Durham. It was getting towards spring and it was swollen. We got up into the wooded area east of Durham, between there and the Rhine River and the Hurtgen Forest area, which I think was our toughest fight of the whole deal. I lost a good friend there, and I remembered his name long enough to write to his wife and tell her how he died. I haven't remembered his name since. I can't remember that boy's name. He was killed a machine gun fire. We were trying to get through a barbed wire entanglement, and we were in a wooded area, and the artillery was zeroing in on us from the rear. We knew we had to move. We couldn't get anybody to... We had what they call Bangalore torpedoes, which is a pipe bomb. Just stick on this wire and blow it out. We couldn't get anybody up there to blow it out. He said, "I'll do that." He went up there, and they just cut him in two with a machine gun. And I don't remember who cut the wire. I think I did. But see, they cut him in two, and then they took off. So I haven't remembered that boy's name since the war. We got through that area, and we didn't get much rest, Oliver. Very, very little, because the Germans were on the run. And we had to chase them, and they sent us to the Rhine just as fast as we could get there. And then this little book, the 16th Infantry, is quite a cavalry of Bonn, Germany, which is, we captured Bonn. And they had a bridge intact across the Rhine there, big old stone bridge was intact, and we captured it. And the A Company, which was mine, and K Company were sitting in houses right at the base of this bridge. And they were getting orders ready to send us across, and we blew the bridge up, I promise. I wondered for a long time what would happen if we'd been on the middle of it. But it blew up right in front of us. So we were held up there for a while, and from there the Remagen bridgehead, you've read about that in history. Remagen was a little town, I think it was south of Bonn, about, I don't know, I expect 70, 80 miles. But they captured this one bridge intact. So when they got everything going, they pulled us back and sent us down to Remagen. And we crossed the Rhine there. We didn't cross on this bridge. We crossed on a pontoon bridge. And went across there and got up into the war was pretty well over then. There was still a lot of fighting, but it was pretty well over. We got up into the Cologne plain, as I remember. And the runner came up to my company. I was a company commander at the time. He came up to my company. He said, "Captain Winter?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "You're to report to regimental headquarters." Well, I knew what was coming, because they were sending the people with the most time overseas and the most combat time. They were sending them home for a 45-day leave. And we were supposed to go back to our outfit when the leave was up. But he said, "You're to report to regimental headquarters." And I said, "Well, goodbye." Well, my old buddy was there with me. He was my executive officer. He said, "Good luck, I'm going home." And I did. I was in Le Havre, France, waiting for a boat out the night the FDR died. And they shipped us home, and of course in the meantime the war was over, so they wouldn't send me back. And they wouldn't send me, I asked him, I knew the war was about over in Japan, and I said, "Well, why don't you send me over there?" I knew I'd never get over there the other way. He said, "No, you got too much combat time." I said, "What are you going to do with me?" He said, "We're going to send you down to Texas to train recruits." I said, "Well, why don't you let me out?" And I sat there in the adjutant's office in Leavenworth, Fort Leavenworth, and he figured up my points. So there's a point system, 5 points for this and that and so on. And it took 128 points for a ground force officer to get out. I think 128 or 132, and I had just enough. So I got out.
Where were you at when Truman dropped the bomb?
We were home then, weren't we?
I was.
I
Where one day I was out on Dad's farm driving over to International Tractor doing summer work. I was on this temporary duty, see? And no, I'd gotten out. I'd gotten my release. And I was out there driving a tractor doing summer work. And word came on the radio that the bomb had been dropped and Japan had surrendered. I just shut the tractor off and went to town. And Julie was still overseas. She hadn't gotten home yet. Well, then I think it was October. I know it was October. She called me from Oklahoma City.
I just got home.
And told me, said, I'm home. I said, well, I'll be there.
He came down. He told everyone he wasn't going to get married. He told his dad he wouldn't get married, but we got married in Wichita.
Well, she looked at
I was
that
pretty
person.
glad to see him, that he wasn't killed or wounded or, maimed. But he came right down, had to come on the bus.
But I can tell you, Oliver, that you can read all the stories. It's not all grime and blood and dirt. There was a lot of funny things. There were a lot of things that I can remember that maybe I shouldn't. I remember one time we were over there, and I had a lieutenant with me. We were in position for the night. He had a machine gun platoon. We established a defensive position. We went out to check our men. I had the company, he had this platoon with me. He stopped at this little crossroads to talk to one of his sergeants, and I went on to check another position. When I got back to our command post, they had him laying there on the floor. Just dead in the market. He had a little hole in his head right here, just like you've seen a hog shot with a .22 bullet. A little hole, piece of shrapnel right there. And I'd seen him not that much before that. We talked to him. And I walked into somewhere in Germany. We got a mortar barrage on our position. We were in town, and we was trying to get everybody organized. I walked around this one building, and there's a man thrashed on the floor, and his head was cut off. And those things stayed.
Tell him about getting on the bed.
I saw another man that was cut in two right here. American soldiers. Now, the Germans didn't pick that up, that man cut him in two, but those shells did that. And also,
Tell him about getting on the bed and to look out. And
this was, again, in Germany somewhere. There's a big old 3 or 4 story house. And we had captured the town, and the Germans were out in the towns are using the valleys, and the Germans are out on the high ground these days. We were trying to figure out how to get somewhere, so we went up in the attic. And I stepped up on this bed there, cover up on the hole in the roof. I stepped up on this bed and looked at that hole. And I thought it felt kind of funny. So I stepped down, pulled the sheet back, and there was a shriveled up little old woman in the bed. She'd been dead for some time. I suppose the grandmother had died up there, and then this was in the cold winter, and she was preserved. But that'll give you the news. She had nothing to do with the war. But she was a casualty of the war.